Sword of the Seven Suns by Gardner F. Fox, originally published in Planet Stories Spring 1947. Read by Jon Gill. Part 7. Flane walked on foot around it, built of sheets of glass, fitted and joined together with the cunning of a master scientist. It glowed like amber fire in the blaze of the sun. Though it nearly blinded him, Flane went nearer and stared down through the sheets of glass into the interior. He saw great whitish globes standing on coiled springs, and where the whiteness was a glowing fire that looked like the heart of the sun. Flane rubbed his eyes, turning away. The rusted hull of the spaceship lured him. His gaze found a burst-open section, and he peered within. Backing out, he stared from prism to ship and back again. This fell from the sky, he mused, in the manner of men long used to their own company. It broke the prism, and Flane gasped. Could it be that this had something to do with the stopping of the machine? But no. In that event, there would be no need for a key to operate the machine. Yet deep inside him, Flane thought that this tragedy might have to blame itself for what had happened to the Clonva. Somehow, at least. Nimbly he went inside the ship and walked its metal floor. Here was wonder piled upon wonder. This vessel was a city-state all by itself. In the domed ceilings were lights, and in the rooms he passed were machines, many and varied strange. The lights and the machines were dead. Had they been alive, it would have been even more miraculous to Flane, for he had been brought up in a world where everything that moved by motor depended upon the machine. Curious, he went and ran his hands over the smooth sides of the things he saw. Do they, too, lie quiet because the machine is dead? He puzzled. Yet this thing that must have come out of the sky in this deserted place was not like the Magna ships that the Clonva had. It could not depend on the machine, no. It must have power of its own. Elated, he ran from chamber to chamber until he stood in a small room with compressed quartz for windows. Dust was piled thickly on floor and bench, and there were two queerly human heaps of dust sprawled on the floor. Flane felt that he stood in the presence of a very great sorrow. Childlike, he searched through the ship. In a drawer he found pictures on paper, pictures far more lifelike than the paintings that had hung in the Museum of Art back in Clarn. He held his photographs to the light and gasped. He was in that picture. Flane felt faint, staring at himself. It was he. It was. The tall man, lean and dark, with black hair, was Flane. He was not mistaken. But the garments the man wore were so odd, and the woman beside him, with the tiny baby in her arms. Flane was positive he did not know her. Flane sat down to riddle himself the question. He remembered now that all his life he had been a little different from the Clonva. Where they were dull and apathetic, he was bursting with vigor. Curious he had ever been to the dismay of Princess Glea. Often he was wont to take apart the various machines that the Clonva owned. Dead machines they were, but exasperating to Flane, who wondered why they did not work. In those days, he had not understood about the machine. He recalled now that Vaudar had said once to the princess, "It is his heritage. The space wanderer's blood is in his veins." That used to fret him, but now he understood. That man was his father, and that woman his true mother. The hate of the Clonva for him that expressed itself when the Mechnics spoke of him among themselves was explained. He was brood of those who had smashed the prism, and possibly the machine. They beheld Flane a living monument to the catastrophe always before their eyes. Flane chuckled, understanding. He stood up. If these were his people, then he was home. And if this were his home, he should know all he could of it. His search of the ship was thorough, and it took 5 days. Some of that time he spent in the saddle, for he had to eat, and there was always the problem of water. On the 3rd day, he solved that problem. He discovered hermetically sealed tanks deep in the bowels of the ship, and when he learned that they had held water, his respect for his race zoomed skyward. The water was warm, but it was pure. At last he chanced upon a room that was filled with fascination. From floor to ceiling it housed machines. He spent hours over them, pondering. They were different from the machines of the Klarnva, for all of their machines had tiny globes atop them. These had no globes. They had wires connecting them to the walls. Eventually he realized that their sources of power were dissimilar. If only he could learn the power of these people. The thought buoyed him like a drug. After 2 days spent in the room, he was dispirited. Whatever power the space wanderers used was as dead as the machine. Flame swore and heaved a wrench at the wall. The wall opened, and something tumbled out, and from the mouth of it a purple flame sizzled and burned, and ate away the wall and the wall beyond that. Flame yelped and sprang. He stared in numb horror until he saw the button on the thing, a button as obvious as a trigger. He crept close and pressed it, and the violet flame stopped. Flame shook for minutes, kneeling on the metal floor with the deadly thing in his hands. End of Part 7. Thank you for listening.